Texas, where lethal justice flows straight into a vein, turning each final breath into a sentence no one can appeal. This is Lethal Justice, a series that exposes the most brutal people ever to lie still under the Huntsville lights. Every name is a wound that still bleeds in the memory of the living. If it were your hands holding the needle, would you have the courage to push it down? Before we begin, hit like, share, and tell us in the comments, which country or state are you watching from? Let's see how far these stories have traveled. First, Billie Joe Wardlow, in Huntsville, Texas. On a summer night, Billie Joe Wardlow lay under dim lights, his arms strapped to a line of pentobarbital. After nearly 30 years waiting to die, the man who once shot an 82-year-old man on his front porch was now called something strange: a good man on death row. 18 years, 6 months, 19 days old. A tall, skinny kid dreaming of escaping dry Texas in a stolen Chevy Silverado. Early in the morning of June 14, 1993, Wardlow stood on Carl Cole's front porch. His girlfriend, Tanya Fulfer, waited in the yard. Wardlow knocked and asked to use the phone. Mr. Cole, old but far from weak, passed the phone through the door, then slammed it shut when he saw the .45. They struggled. A single shot cracked through the air, taking Mr. Cole's life right there on the porch. His body fell onto the wooden floor, as silent as the night wind tearing through that broken porch. Wardlow ran. Police caught him 2 days later in South Dakota. In a Morris County cell, he smashed his head, tried to strangle himself, wrestling with the guilt no one had ever taught him how to wash off. A deputy, who knew his family, handed him a stack of paper. "Write it all down. If you can't handle it, tear it up." But Wardlow never tore it up. His confession, ending with "just because he pissed me off," locked him to that needle from the very first line. Tanya Fulfer, his girlfriend, refused to testify for him. Her plea deal came only after the jury agreed to bind Wardlow's neck to a lethal dose. Exhausted defense lawyers, an inexperienced forensics expert, 3 vague witnesses. That was enough for Texas to stamp him worst of the worst. But Billie Joe Wardlow's story didn't die in that cell. Inside his 6x6-foot square, he fixed typewriters for other inmates, shared writing paper, soap, packs of noodles. He played Dungeons and Dragons with 41 others on death row, acting as wizard, swordsman, monster, so people who had killed for real could kill imaginary things and forget the blood, just for a while. "Pay it forward, as the saying goes," Wardlow said. "If you get something, you pass it on, even if you're waiting for a cold needle." For 25 years, Wardlow looked after people the world believed were beyond saving. His final appeal to the United States Supreme Court was only one cold line. "Are you sure an 18-year-old brain is grown enough to say dangerous forever?" Researchers signed their names. Future dangerousness is an illusion. The human brain isn't done developing at 18. But Texas still nodded. Lethal justice doesn't wait for an MRI scan. Wardlow had no last meal, just a standard tray. One final note to another inmate: "If I go, don't forget to share my writing paper with the new guys." In that room with the needle, someone whispered, "If we could take back that one day in '93, he'd be the best man on this row." But the Texas Knight didn't care to answer. The needle touched his vein. The star map Wardlow once drew for his cellmates still hangs in cell number 10. He died, leaving behind a question that lingers longer than pentobarbital in the blood. When justice needs only one day, who pays for all the years left behind? Second, Travis Trevino Runnels. On a cold January morning, 2003, inside the Clements Unit Shoe Factory in Texas, the sound of leather cutters mixed with the shuffle of inmates mopping floors, polishing boots for the officers to wear home. Travis Trevino Runnels stood still in the corner, holding a shoe knife. His stare cut deeper than the steel blade clenched in his palm. Since dawn, he had told fellow inmate Bud Williams that today he would get transferred, no matter what. If he couldn't get the barber job he wanted, he would find his own way out, or someone else would not walk out alive. Around 7 in the morning, Runnels saw Stanley Wiley, the civilian supervisor of the factory, walk past the row of cutting tables. Just seconds later, Travis stepped behind him, whispered something no one ever heard. One quick pull, one clean slice, Then he turned his back and calmly walked back to his corner. Wiley collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, no chance to say another word. When inmate Phillippe Yao asked him why, Runnels answered flatly, "It could have been anyone, as long as they were white." Yao warned him, "If he dies, you'll end up in the death chair." Runnels gave a cold laugh. "A dead man can't talk." Before he became a killer behind bars, Travis already had reasons to fall apart. A childhood bruised by violence, broken schooling, arrested for theft at 18. Probation, then theft again. By 1997, he used a gun to rob a store and got 70 years. But prison walls were never enough to cage his thirst for violence. At Clement's unit, Runnels attacked guards more than once, punching faces, throwing urine, tossing filth, his discipline record thicker than his inmate file. Outside that shoe factory, everyone knew he was dangerous, but no one thought the final cut would be that sharp. In 2005, Travis Runnels went to trial. He confessed, hoping to save his own life with the story that, "I'm not a threat anymore." His lawyers tried to hold him up with 7 other inmates who testified that he behaved well, didn't fight, didn't cause trouble, but old files, fresh blood, and the line, "A dead man can't talk," sealed off every way back. Family once promised they would testify for mercy, then walked out halfway. No one stood to say what kind of child Travis had been, where he was sent, when he last got a hug. The trial ended with a cold nod. Death sentence. More than 16 years waiting, appeal files stacked with claims of bad defense, false testimony by state witnesses. But nothing could change a single cut and a body that no longer breathed. On December 11, 2019, Travis Trevino Runnels stepped into the lethal injection room in Huntsville, Texas. He looked through the thick glass, smiled, and blew a kiss to his girlfriend and lawyer sitting behind it. His final words were not an apology, not a plea for mercy, just one playful line, as if none of it was real. "Woof, woof." Minutes later, the needle touched a vein. A man with nothing left to tell, and Texas closed one more file. Third, Quintin Phillippe Jones. On a May night, 2021, inside the ice-cold injection room in Huntsville, Quintin Phillippe Jones lay still under a dull yellow light. No reporters were allowed to witness this death. A technical error, or a silent ending to a sentence that sparked debate for 2 decades? More than 20 years earlier, on September 11th, a small alley in Fort Worth fell silent under the sound of a baseball bat hitting the floor of Berthena Bryant's house. She was 83 years old, Jones's great-aunt. She once fed him meals, slipped him pocket money for new shoes. That night, Jones stepped inside, high on heroin and cocaine. One swing, then many more. $30 traded for blood, enough to buy more drugs. But the story didn't start in Fort Worth. It began in a rotting house in Livingston, Texas, where Jones grew up with violence, handguns, brothers who hurt him, and a mother who once pressed a gun to his head when he was 7. A child who hurt himself to please a gang, then shot himself trying to break free. But the drugs pulled him back, and one night, a baseball bat decided his fate. Police caught Jones a few days later. He confessed to it all, but in court, the prosecutor didn't stop with Bryant's death. They brought up 2 other names, Clark Peoples, 27, and Mark Sanders, 19. Both died 3 months before Bryant. Jones admitted he was involved but put most of the blame on Ricky Russa, who got life and could see parole in 2039. Jones, who was black, got death. Russa, who was white, still has a chance to breathe free air. Bryant's family, tragedy layered on tragedy, didn't hate Jones. The victim's sister, Maddie Long, wrote to Governor Abbott asking him to spare Jones. "I forgave him long ago. I still love him. Please don't kill him again." More than 183,000 people signed a clemency petition. Writer Suleika Jawad, who once fought cancer, said Jones sent her letters to help her keep living. But Texas didn't listen. On his last day, Jones waited alone in his cell. Just a standard tray for dinner. Texas ended last meals in 2011. The needle sat next to cold food. People called that justice. When asked for his final words, Jones didn't preach. He spoke slowly, like lifting guilt off his chest, like burying himself with his own hands. I would like to thank all of the supporting people who helped me over the years. To Mad Maddie, my twin, Sonia, Angie, and all the homies, aka Money and Peruvian Queen, including Crazy Dominican. I was so glad to leave this world a better, more positive place. It's not an easy life with all the negativities. Love all my friends and all the friendships that I have made. They are like the sky. It is all part of the life, like a big full plate of food for the soul. I hope I left everyone a plate of food full of happy memories, happiness, and no sadness. I'm done, Warden. No cameras rolled, no newspapers watched. Quintin Phillippe Jones, 41 years old, died as quietly as he once pressed a gun to his own chest to escape life. Some say justice won. Some ask, when a tortured child grows into a monster and the monster dies, who answers for that child? The Texas night swallowed one more name, and the $30 from that night never bought peace for anyone. Fourth, Mark Anthony Soliz, Texas. A sweltering June afternoon, 2010. Inside a small brick house in Johnson County, 61-year-old Nancy Weatherly still believed an old wooden door could keep out life's storms. She didn't know that outside, Mark Anthony Soliz, 27 years old, raised in days blurred by liquor and shouting, was drifting through Fort Worth with Jose Ramos. They carried guns, grabbed wallets, stole cars, and spread fear through the Texas night. For 8 days, the two moved like shadows, knocking on any door that came into sight. On the night of June 14th, Nancy's door swung open. Soliz stepped in first, Ramos behind him, the cold black gun cutting through her trembling voice. In minutes, coins, small jewelry, and trust in a locked door vanished with the sound of a shot. A bullet fired from behind, silencing the gentle greeting of a woman who loved tending flowers by her porch. When caught, Soliz first claimed he waited in the car and knew nothing about what Ramos did. Then, like someone too tired to push tragedy away, he gave in. "I'll take it all. Let's get it over with." Behind bars, he still laughed, telling his girlfriend about shooting the old lady like a dark, twisted joke. In court, Soliz built one last line of defense: fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Scars left by the alcohol his mother drank while carrying him, making him impulsive, reckless, easily led. But the court listened, then nodded. Not enough. An IQ of 75, just above the death line. And Texas had never spared anyone for a faint line on a medical paper. 9 years later, Soliz lay on the Huntsville gurney. Behind the glass, Nancy's family looked at him one last time. Soliz's lips moved, his voice rough. "I wanted to apologize for the grief and the pain that I caused y'all. It took me 27 years to do so. Man, I want to apologize. I am at peace." Pentobarbital ran backward through his veins. The needle put a quiet end to a late confession, an apology too thin to bring Nancy Weatherly back to her porch. Fort Worth stayed the same. Summer wind still drifted through its streets, a reminder that a child born in liquor can grow up to hold a gun. And Texas, harsh as ever, still bolts the last door shut. Fifth, John William King, Jasper, Texas. A summer night, 1998. A lonely road cut through pine trees where James Bird Jr., 49 years old, walked home alone. 3 men pulled up in a truck. Sean Berry behind the wheel, John William King and Lawrence Brewer in the back seat. One offer, one cigarette, then the GMC pickup sped off. But Bird never made it home again. The next morning, the white gravel road leading to Beech Grove Church fell silent, as if swallowing every trace. But the traces stayed. A long, dark trail, torn clothes, and Bird's remains left near the church gate. A sign of brutal hate in America at the edge of the 20th century. King was 24 then, born and raised in Jasper's quiet country life. But prison turned him into someone else. Tattoos covered his body, Aryan letters, lightning bolts, even a noose. He joined a white supremacist gang in prison, wrote letters dripping with hate. In one note to Brewer, he bragged, "No matter what happens, we made history." When police raided Berry's apartment, they found King's clothes, brown stains on his sandals, Bird's cap, a cigarette butt, fingerprints, all tied King to that dark night. In front of the press, King insisted Berry drove him and Brewer home, leaving Berry and Bird alone. But the prison letters betrayed that lie. In court, King stayed silent. He never spoke to the jury, never explained. fighting back only with technical arguments. Even near the end, he claimed his lawyers failed him, that they argued details instead of pushing not guilty as he wanted. But courts from Texas to the Supreme Court said no, evidence doesn't lie. On April 24, 2019, John William King lay on Huntsville's gurney. No friends, no family. Only Bird's two sisters and his niece stood on the other side of the glass. King said nothing, but left behind one note. Capital punishment. Them without the capital get the punishment. Then he closed his eyes, the drug flowed, his veins turned cold. James Byrd Jr. was gone long before, but King's story never really closed. His crime lit a fire under hate crime laws, tying Bird's name to Matthew Shepard's, carved into America's memory. But Bird's sister said it best, like a nail hammered into Texas ground. He got to lie still, easy. My brother never got that chance. John William King died quiet. But that 3-mile trail through the dark still haunts Texas, a lesson America can't erase with just a needle of pentobarbital. 6th, Robert Sparks, Dallas, Texas. A September night, 2007. Robert Sparks lay still in the dark, listening to a voice whisper in his ear, "They're poisoning you. Kill them." People said he was psychotic, trapped in paranoia, haunted by voices like thorns in his mind. But that night what Sparks heard didn't stay inside his head. On a bed, Chair Agnew, 30 years old, Sparks's wife, slept soundly. A string of wounds stole her dawn away. Sparks left Chair on the white sheets and walked toward the children's room. Harold, 9 years old. Raekwon, 10. Sparks led each boy to the kitchen where everything fell silent except for the metallic scent against brick walls. It didn't stop there. Sparks returned to the bedroom where his wife's 2 daughters, his stepchildren, lay wide awake staring. He threatened them, shut every escape. The 2 girls couldn't break free from Sparks's nightmare. When he was arrested, Sparks told police, "They were plotting to kill me, I only defended myself." Doctors wrote it down. Acute psychosis, auditory hallucinations, paranoia. His lawyers stacked piles of appeals, claiming misdiagnosis, mental illness, limited intellect. But Texas didn't nod. Even a tiny tie pin, a court worker's pin shaped like a syringe, kept reporters following the trial like ink spreading on paper. The 2 surviving stepdaughters took the stand, pointing at Sparks. "He once said we'd never live through it. It's been 12 years, and we're still here." The dream was torn apart, but Huntsville's night still opened its door for him like it did for so many others. On his final day, Sparks lay under the execution room lights. Through the glass that split the living from the leaving, he looked at the victim's family and his own, and whispered his last words. "I am sorry for the hard times, and what hurts me is that I hurt y'all. Even y'all, too. I love you all. I feel it." Pentobarbital slipped quietly through his veins, carrying him away. One last breath, then 3 small snores marked the end. A nightmare closed after 23 minutes. Robert Sparks left no last meal. He only left a kitchen tainted with iron, a bedroom stripped of dreams, and the same question: if someone had stopped the voices in his head that night, would 2 children still have woken up the next morning? 7. John Stephen Gardner. Close to midnight, January 2005, a faint whisper came through the 911 line, "I've been shot in the head. It was my husband, white truck, Mississippi plate." The woman still had strength to make the call even with a bullet lodged in her head. Her name was Tammy Gardner, and the one who pulled the trigger was John Stephen Gardner, her ex-husband, the man she once swore about. "I'll only escape him when he kills me." When police broke down the door to that closed-up house, Tammy was curled under a blanket soaked in red. She had crawled from her bed to the bathroom, grabbed toilet paper to wipe the wound, then dragged herself back to bed, whispering for help. 13 hours later, Gardner knocked on a Mississippi station door, pretending he wanted to turn himself in. He didn't say a word, but the white pickup, a stray red thread on the driver's seat, and a tag from Brahma gloves bought at a Texas gas station all pointed at the man on the run. But for John Stephen Gardner, one bullet was never the whole story. Tammy's case was only the last chapter in a long record of violence. In 1982, Gardner shot his first wife, Rhoda Gardner, 8 months pregnant, right at the apartment gate. One shot to her chest, one shot that ended her pregnancy. Rhoda survived but was left paralyzed and died later after countless surgeries. Gardner pleaded to assault with a weapon, did 8 years, and walked out calling himself a man forgiven by God. But God didn't live with him. The women did. His third wife, Margaret, said he sat at the end of her bed every night, stroking a blade sharp enough to split skin. When Margaret tried to leave, he chased her to a restaurant, kidnapped her in front of co-workers. With his fourth wife, he killed her dog to send a message, then threatened to skin her daughter if she ever resisted. Margaret's child was only 13 when Gardner crept in like a hunter, massaging, painting her face, whispering that sleeping with the devil gives you powers. One night, he beat her so badly she could barely stand, just because her mother came home late. With Tammy, that same cycle just found a new face. Friends saw her come to work with bruises, cuts, and fear in her eyes. She once said, "I'll only get away when I die." And she did. A single bullet ended Tammy's hope, her final call, her last words that made sure the monster behind her couldn't hide. In court, Gardner never shed a tear. He sat listening to the jury read the verdict, joked with guards, told Bible stories, and blamed childhood trauma for his blood-stained hands. But a handwritten letter he once sent his parents, "Thank you for a wonderful childhood," crushed every excuse. When the prosecutor checked his future dangerousness, it only took 3 hours to flip through his file. A man who shot a wife, killed a child's hope, hunted with blades, guns, and bare hands. That was enough for Texas to rule. If this man lives, every door will bleed. John Stephen Gardner died in the Huntsville injection room, his eyes as cold as the blade he once held in the dark. He looked through the glass dividing the living from the dead and spoke his last words. "I would like to say sorry for your grief. I hope what I'm doing today will give you peace, joy, closure. I know you cannot forgive me, but I hope one day you will." An apology too thin to wash off blood from 2 wives, 2 children, and countless bruises no one bothered to count. Tammy Gardner, Rhoda Gardner, and the women who stayed silent, left behind only one old question that still lingers. If justice had come sooner, who might still be alive? 8th, Billie Wayne Coble, Huntsville, Texas says. A late February afternoon, 2019. Billie Wayne Coble, 70 years old, hair gray as ash, lay stretched out on a cold gurney. He was the oldest death row inmate Texas ever sent off with a needle since the state brought capital punishment back. 30 years earlier, summer of 1989, Axtell, Texas. A quiet village woke up to gunfire. After more than a year of a marriage drowning in violence, Karen Vicha told her husband she wanted a divorce, but Coble wouldn't let go. One night, Karen came home to find her children tied up inside the house, and Coble stood there, eyes wild, whispering that 3 people she loved, her father, mother, and brother, were gone. He dragged Karen to a car, planning to run with her like she was his last stolen thing. The car sped down the highway. A deputy trailed close behind. Karen broke free. Coble's car crashed into a parked vehicle, ending the short escape. In court, they opened up a battered file. An orphaned childhood, 12 years in foster care, a mother sent to a mental hospital. At 17, Coble joined the Army and went to Vietnam. He came back to Texas with storms buried in his head, turning into violence against women and his own family. Children and ex-wives had spoken up before, threats, harm, but the Axtell murders sealed Coble's name to Huntsville's hallways. In 1990, he got death. Then the law shifted, the case retried, then death again. 3 decades passed while Coble clung to the Supreme Court door. He pointed to the McCoy ruling, where a defendant claimed the right to control his defense. Coble said, "I don't want to plead guilty." But the final appeal shut down just 2 hours before the execution room lit up. On that Huntsville afternoon, Billie Wayne Coble looked through the glass. On one side were 3 people still standing by him: his son, daughter-in-law, an old friend. On the other side were 6 family members of the 3 people buried 30 years ago. When the prison worker asked for his last words, Coble dropped a small joke into the microphone. "Yes, sir. That will be $5. Take care." The needle slipped in. Pentobarbital flowed quietly. Outside the glass, Coble's son punched it hard, fighting with officers. Both were handcuffed on the spot. Inside the chamber, Billie Wayne Coble closed his eyes. The 3 lives lost in Axtell never heard his "take care." An old man who stayed caged for 30 years finally left it behind, leaving only a Texas dusk and the glass that forever splits 2 worlds. 9th, Justin Grant Hall. El Paso, Texas. An April night, 2002. Arlene, born Hector. Arturo Diaz spent a long time in front of the mirror before stepping out. A thick layer of makeup hid tired dark circles, long black hair brushed straight as spilled ink, a soft black sweater brushing her wrists. Arlene smiled at a friend. "When I get my own place, I'll be a girl 24/7. But that night, Arlene never came back home. Outside Sergio's bar, close to midnight, Justin Grant Hall leaned against a dark GMC Yukon. A thin man, eyes deep as the night, flicked a cigarette onto the concrete. No one heard what they said. All anyone knew was that a few hours later, Arlene lay face down on Annapra Road, that soft black sweater stained red. A single bullet from behind ended Arlene's dream of living as her true self. Police closed the file with 2 words. Hate crime. Someone killed just for daring to be real. 10 days later, Hall was arrested with the gun hidden under his car seat. In the file, he smirked as they read the charges, answering in a flat voice like he was tired of breathing. He didn't deny a thing, and Arlene never got to say another word. But he didn't stop there. While waiting for trial, Hall dragged another name into his string of guilt, Melanie Bilhartz. A woman who stumbled onto a filthy secret. A stash house packed with drugs, too dangerous for police lights. This time, there was no bullet. Police found Melanie in the back of a vehicle crossing New Mexico. Wires wrapped around her neck, cheekbones shattered, hands missing the prints that could have told it all. She was buried shallow under cold sand, along with answers that should have brought Hall down sooner. In the interrogation room, Hall confessed. Same flat tone, eyes fixed on the ceiling like he was talking to air. In court, he sneered, blew kisses at the prosecutor, flipped off the jury. When the death sentence came down, Hall just shrugged, turned to his lawyer and said, "Better dead than rotting away." Texas granted him that wish. No last meal, no final words. Hall walked into Huntsville's injection room like stepping back into the same cold cell where he once muttered threats. "Whoever drags me out of the dark, I'll leave behind blood." The needle touched his vein, pentobarbital flooded his heart backward. No one heard him say another word. A man who ended lives because he feared being exposed now disappeared without a sound. Arlene, Melanie. 2 strangers linked forever in the same file, turned to shadows drifting beneath the desert night. 1 bullet, 1 wire, and Texas quietly slammed the last door shut, swallowing every question that never found a voice. 10th, Billie Jack Krutzinger. Fort Worth, Texas. An April afternoon, 2003. Inside a quiet house, 2 women, one 89, the other 71, made tea and waited for a soft breeze to cool the day. The door wasn't locked. The city still believed that old age and kindness kept strangers away. Billie Jack Krutzinger didn't think so. He knocked, stepped across Pearl McGurk's doorway, and her daughter, Patricia Sirens, too, like walking into a pawn shop. In the court file, only a few words remain. Break-in, search, then blood. 2 days passed before neighbors found that heavy silence. By then, Krutzinger had driven down to Galveston. In his pocket was Patricia's credit card, swiped for a few drinks, a cheap motel room, some bragging stories. Police found him in a grimy bar, his words slurred. The DNA on that kitchen floor stayed like a trap that never closed by itself. Some said his arrest was illegal. He hadn't given his name yet. There was no warrant. But the confession spilled out anyway. And a drop of DNA on a sink rail tied Krutzinger back to that quiet house, where 2 people, well past 80, still trusted the world enough to leave the door unlocked. 16 years later, Krutzinger still punched prison walls. "My lawyer was lazy. No one gave me money to investigate. I had booze. I had scars in my brain. My mind isn't sharp enough." But the court ruled. The file was thicker than the hangover. The truth needed no more digging. On the night of September 4th, 2019, Huntsville felt cold as a steel drum. Krutzinger lay on the gurney under a harsh yellow light. No one from Pearl's or Patricia's family stood behind the glass. Only 3 fellow inmates. He nodded at them, gave his final words. "I'll miss pancakes and old black and white movies, but where I'm going, everything will be in color." Pentobarbital flowed quietly into his vein. Krutzinger closed his eyes, carrying a hope that somewhere parents, siblings, and old deaths waited with open arms, and Fort Worth would stop speaking his name. Pearl McGuirk and Patricia Siren, 2 quiet shadows, still linger somewhere in the memory of a city that never locked its heart. One autumn night closed this file, leaving behind an old question. How many locks does it take to keep peace when no one locks the human heart? 10 lives ended under Texas's needle, but behind every execution stand dozens of silent families, children who lost mothers, parents who grew old waiting for word, only to get one cold notice that the killer is gone. Remember this. Behind every sentence lies pain no injection can wash away. Justice can close a file on a life, but no one can stitch the scar shut. I hope you, me, and anyone watching this series remember. Every crime starts with one small choice, one reckless minute, one hate that grows too strong. Don't let yourself become the next name on the lethal justice list. And don't forget, more stories are waiting to be told. If you believe justice isn't just a needle, share your thoughts, share this video, let this warning travel farther. We may stand helpless before the past, but let's not stay blind to the future.